Okay, we have had polynomials usually with just one variable at a time. And so what if there is an incident where you have more than one variable attached to a coefficient? Well, we're going to learn in this video how to add and subtract and multiply those with that have several different variables in them. But first, let's just make sure that we understand some of our vocabulary. I'm just going to put a couple of terms up here. So 8x to the 4th, y to the 5th, minus 7x cubed, y squared, minus x squared y, minus 5x plus 1. Okay, so notice how we just have several different terms in here. So we have x to the 4th, y to the 5th, and this one we have negative 7x cubes, y squareds. Well, remember that when we're adding and subtracting these things, we can only add and subtract like terms, which means it has to have the same variable and the same exponent. So if I have an x squared y, that is not the same as an x squared y squared. Those are two different terms or kind of terms, so you could not add those together. So we just want to go over some of this vocabulary. So each one of these is a term. So this is a term, here's a term, this is a term. Each one of these are all terms. And as we learned about our polynomials, then this would be a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 term polynomial. And so the coefficients. So remember, the coefficients are the actual numbers that are in front. Let me do that in a highlighter. So in this case, the coefficient is the 8. The coefficient here is a negative 7. The coefficient here would be a negative 1. The coefficient on this term is a negative 5. And then the 1 is just a constant. So then we talked about degrees at one point also, and remember the degrees are the highest exponent. Well, what happens here when you have an x to the 4th, y to the 5th? Well, we just add those together and we say this term has a degree of 9, 4 plus 5, 9. This term would have a degree of 3 plus 2, or 5. This term, the next term, would have a degree of 2 plus, remember, there's always that imaginary 1 if there's nothing there. So that has a degree of 3. And this one would have a degree of 1. And then you take that highest degree, and that is the degree of your entire polynomial. So if we were to describe this, it would be considered a 5-term polynomial with the degree of our highest one, which is the 9. And so that's how we would describe that polynomial, which I know you're going to go around describing polynomials to all your friends later, so have fun with that. Okay, so remember that we can only add and subtract like terms, and that means same variable with same exponents when we're adding and subtracting. Okay, so this term, we've got negative 8x squared y minus 3xy plus 6. And we're going to add the polynomial 10x squared y plus 5xy minus 10 to that one. So let's see what are like terms here. Well, we have a x squared y. So the only thing I can add to that is another x squared y. Well, we happen to have that on this other side. So we have negative 8 plus 10 x squared y's. That gives us 2 x squared y's. Okay, what are some other common terms that we have here? We have a negative 3xy. And we have a positive 5xy. Well, those can only be joined with the xy's. So we're going to combine those. That gives us 2 xy's. And then we're going to join our constants. We have a positive 6 and a negative 10, and that gives us negative 4. So just be very careful on those, making sure that it has to be exact, okay? So now we're going to do a subtraction one, and remember our rule on the subtraction one was that we have to take, let me change colors again, take this and make sure we distribute that minus sign to all of these terms. So let's just go ahead and rewrite this with that distributed. So we're going to have 7x cubes minus 10x squared y's plus 2xy squared minus 5. Okay, there's my first polynomial. Now I'm going to distribute that negative sign. And since these things are getting longer, I know I talked about before putting them underneath, adding up those like terms by adding these things vertically. So this negative sign distributed to that 4x cubed makes negative 4x cubed. And I'm just going to put him underneath there. Then that's going to make plus 12x squared y's. Then that will be a plus 3xy squared and minus 5. Now we're ready to add these things together. Okay, because we've distributed that minus sign, we've changed all those signs, so now all we're doing is adding the like terms. All right, I'm going to write that answer over here. So we've got 7x cubes plus a negative 4x cubes. That gives us 3x cubes. So then we have the negative 10x squared y's. And notice that's not the same as xy squared. Those are different terms because they're different exponents with different variables. So that gives us only 2x squared y's. Then we have 5xy squareds, and a negative 5 plus another negative 5 makes negative 10. So that's your final answer. So this is really important to make sure you can read your own writing. When you're writing these things down, you don't get those exponents in the wrong spot. You know, take your time, take room, write clearly so that you're knowing what's the difference between an x squared y or an xy squared or you know, whatever they are. Just don't get them confused. All right, so then let's talk about multiplying these variables. Well, remember, we multiply the numbers, but in multiplication, we add those exponents of the same bases. Remember, that's that exponent, that product rule of our exponents is that we add those exponents together. So let's take it one step at a time. We're just going to go down the line. 6 times 10, 60. So we have x times x to the 4th. Maybe I should do this. So 6 times 10. Then we have x times x to the 4th. Well, what's that? 4 plus 1, x to the 5th. Next, we're going to take the y cubed and multiply it by that y squared. Well, how many y's does that give us? 3 plus 2 is 5. And that is it. There's your final answer. So multiply, you add your exponents. When you add and subtract, you can only tell me how many of that exponent you have. So you're just adding together like terms. Okay, so now we're going to do one where we've got to do a little bit of distributive property. So let's look at when we take the 6xy squared, we're going to multiply it by every term in here. Okay, so I'm going to color code again. So we've got 6xy squared, and we're going to multiply that by the 10x to the 4th, y to the 5th. Okay, so let's do that. 6 times 10, we know is 60. X times x to the 4th gives us x to the 5th. Y squared times y to the 5th is y to the 7th. So now we're going to take that 6xy squared times the next term, negative 2x squared y's. Okay, let's see what we get there. So 6 times negative 2 gives us negative 12. Now we're adding our exponents, x and x squared. That gives us x cubed. Y squared times the y gives us y cubed. So now we're taking the 6x y squared, and we're going to multiply it by that last term times the 3. So 6 times 3 is 18. But we still have to list all of those, even though we're not multiplying them by anything, it's still being multiplied by that. So we're going to list them, and that is your final answer. If there were any terms we could join together because they were like terms, we could simplify that, but we cannot. There's nothing else we can do. Okay, so here's one where we're going to have to multiply out some binomials, and remember our rule there. Take the first term, multiply it by everything in the second term. So we're taking the 7x, we're going to multiply that by the 3x, then we're going to take the 7x, and we're going to multiply that by that negative y. Then we're going to take this negative 6y and multiply it by everything in here. Times the 3x, the negative 6y, times that negative y. Okay, so now let's go do it. So 7 times 3 is 21. X times x is x squared. So 7 times negative 1 is negative 7. And we just have our x and our y. So negative 6y times 3x is negative 6 times 3, negative 18. And we also have that would be like yx, but that's the same thing as xy because order doesn't matter in multiplication. So little side thinking note over here, if I have 2 xy's plus 7 yx's, well, those are like terms because they have, x's to the first power, y's to the first power. Order doesn't matter. If I multiply 2 times 3, I get 6. If I multiply 3 times 2, I'm still getting 6. So order does not matter in multiplication. So we will be able to join those like terms at the end. Okay, so go back to our lesson here. Side note on the side there. So negative 6 times negative 1 makes positive 6, and y times y is y squared. And again, like I said, these are like terms. Even if you listed this one as a yx, that would be perfectly fine. But just know that in the end, those are like terms. So we will add that together. So we have negative 7 and a negative 18. That's going to give us 25. So our final answer there is 21x squared minus the 25xy's, once we join those terms together, plus 6y squareds. Okay, so you try to do these last couple on your own. Remember, this means to write it twice. You do that one on your own. I'm going to just multiply it out over here. And join my like terms at the end. So I get 4x squared plus 16xy plus 16y squareds. Okay, and hopefully you can do this one also. So taking that first term, distributing it, then we'll take the second term, Okay, and now here we will join together any like terms that we have, and I just sort of go down the line. Do I have any more x cubes? No. So x cubed is listed by itself. Do I have any more x squared y's? Oh, I have this one right here. Well, those are going to cancel out, leaving me with 0 x squared y's. What about xy squareds? Those cancel out also, leaving me with just the y cubed. So remember, if I have a positive one and a negative one, those are all canceling out. So that's that. All right, so one last thing I added that wasn't on my note sheet, but how to evaluate these things. So if you have 3x squared y minus 4y plus 5x, and you want to evaluate it for x is equal to 2 and y is equal to negative 3, well, all that means is we're going to stick 2 in for every x that's in our equation. We're going to stick negative 3 in for every y in our equation. So I'm going to try to rewrite this. Let's say I'm going to put my x's in the green. Let's do our y's in the hot pink. Okay, so we've got the 3. Then we're going to take our x, and that is 2, and we're going to square that, and then that is times y, which is now negative 3. Minus 4 times y, which is negative 3, plus 5 times x, which is 2. Okay, so now we've got to go evaluate this. So 3 times 2 squared times negative 3. Well, 2 squared is 4, so that makes 3 times 4 times negative 3 minus 4 times negative 3 plus 5 times 2. Okay, so now we're ready to do multiplication. 3 times 4 is 12. 12 times negative 3 makes negative 36. Negative 4 times negative 3 should make positive 12 plus 10. Well, then if I go to my calculator and I say negative 36 plus 12 plus 10, put all that together and I get negative 14. It's my final answer. So just sticking these numbers in for that variable. Watch out that if you're squaring it, you're only squaring whatever number that is. So we're just taking this and sticking it in here, and taking that and sticking it in there. So making it nice and messy for you. So that is the end of that. Good luck on your homework.